I'm grateful for this opportunity to be with you in worship today. But there's a part of me that thinks I might need to apologize for my text selection today. You see, the saga of Joseph is very long. It spans the last 8 chapters of Genesis, and it is dramatic, full of interesting characters, adventure, and plot twists. And today I have just dropped us in at the very end. It is Book 7 of Harry Potter, or Season 8 of Game of Thrones. It's the season finale without any of the build-up. And so I apologize if there are some plot holes. And let's back up for a moment. The story of Joseph is a detailed account of his life. It's a bit of a riches to rags, back to riches story. As a teenager, Joseph, the favored son of Jacob, finds himself the target of his brother's jealousy. So frustrated that their youngest brother is the one who has captured their father's attention, they plot to kill Joseph, but settle on selling him into slavery in Egypt instead. The once beloved son of Jacob is cut off from his family, his home, his whole world. In Egypt, Joseph manages to survive, but it is not without more trauma. He endures slavery, he is framed for crimes he did not commit, and he is sent to jail. And though eventually he becomes the advisor to Pharaoh and his troubles in Egypt are apparently over, he is always an outsider, alone with his memories of his brother's betrayal. He has endured so much, and then one day, his brothers come to him, and like any good drama, it's a reversal of the fates. Joseph's brothers once held all the power. They manipulated Joseph's life without a care for their sibling. But now they are desperate and in need of help, and they are asking that same brother for it. They just don't know it. Joseph is suddenly the one in control, and so he starts to make them pay. First, he sends his brothers to jail just as he was once imprisoned. And then he asks them to bring Benjamin to him, and he sets up his trap. In framing Benjamin, the other favorite son of Jacob, Joseph repeats his own trauma, but this time the brothers are at his mercy, and he will make them go back to their father and explain to him how they lost his beloved son, just as they never did all those years ago. The brothers will finally be punished for what they have done. Joseph's retribution is almost complete, and here in our text for today is where the story makes an unexpected U-turn. Joseph does not follow through with his plan. Instead, he forgives them. We have spent chapter upon chapter building up to this final moment of justice, and what happens? Joseph abandons the plan and instead invites his brothers, who have done undeniably terrible things to him, into his home, and he offers them a spot in his community. To be honest with you, I have trouble fully imagining what that moment looked like, because it feels so unexpected. This sort of thing just doesn't happen. Because we live in a world where the expectation is that the brothers need to be punished, that somehow they have to suffer for their deeds, and only then can things be made right. Now, I know that punishment and crime and justice are all complicated issues, and it's not always the case that people who do bad things are held accountable for their actions, and there are plenty of people who are innocent and still they are punished. And within the context of our modern-day criminal justice system, I know that there are some people, usually people of color, who are punished disproportionately for the crimes they commit. It's complicated. But even in admitting it's complicated, we still expect there should be some sort of punishment. How can we know the brothers won't do it again unless we punish them first? How can they ever truly be in relationship again if the brothers do not repay their debt? And yet Joseph forgives their debt by choosing a different path. If I try to crawl into Joseph's skin in this moment, I hear the cries of my brothers. I see their pain, their guilt, their repentance, all of it. And I can see how Joseph might realize that should he punish his brothers just as they hurt him, well, he becomes like them, and the cycle of crime and punishment continues on. No, as outrageous as it seems, Joseph chooses to be different. Joseph chooses the unexpected mercy because he no longer wants to live in a world where we punish each other. I think Joseph is tired of punishment. He is tired of wondering, if I hurt someone like they have hurt me, will I feel safe then, or will I feel whole then, or will then I finally be happy again? I imagine these are the questions Joseph might have asked himself when he looked into the eyes of his brothers, and they are certainly questions floating around our world today. And in particular, they are questions that I thought about a lot yesterday. With the news of the mass shooting in El Paso, and here closer to home, the death of a young woman who was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time, I racked my brain for the ways we could move forward. How could these communities, in the midst of all this violence, begin to feel safe again? And what does justice look like for these victims? And then I woke up this morning with the news of another mass shooting in Dayton, Ohio, and I asked these questions all over again. Maybe, I thought, if the punishment were great enough, maybe if those who were responsible could feel an ounce of what those who had been hurt could feel, maybe then I might feel a little better. I think it's a natural reaction to have, and I admit I have it a lot, especially when bad, violent news breaks, and especially when it hits close to home. But at the end of the day, after I have imagined every scenario of justice and punishment, I don't feel any better, only tired. Because like Joseph, I am tired of punishment. And this is not to say that we should blindly forgive and forget, or that people should not be held accountable for their actions, or that there is nothing we can do to prevent senseless violence. But there has to be another way. There has to be a way we could hold each other responsible without becoming thirsty for another's suffering. There has to be another way, because an outcome based on punishment, an outcome based on inflicting more pain, because it might make us feel better or safer or more powerful, well, that doesn't sound like justice. Justice, God's true justice, restores something that has been lost. In God's kingdom, we are invited into an imagining of the world in which no wound, those we have and those we have inflicted on others, is too deep to be made whole again. God's justice restores, not punishes. And most days it feels as if we are a long way from God's justice. And so Joseph and his choice seems outrageous and naive and too simplistic for a world as complicated and cynical as ours. It's a nice story. It's a good Sunday school lesson, but that's not how the real world works. Until one day it is. And sometimes people abandon the real world and they make unexpected, difficult choices, choices that choose a justice that restores over a justice that punishes. It's what Kate and Andy Grossmare decided to do. In 2010, the Grossmares received some of the worst news of their life. Their 19-year-old daughter, Anne, had been killed by her boyfriend, Connor. The two had been arguing about something, and Connor's dad kept a shotgun in the house, and, well, I think you know how that story goes. Kate and Andy got a phone call I pray none of us ever receive, that their beloved daughter would not wake up. And they were forced to confront the fact that the man they loved, someone they considered family, was the reason for their tragedy. And in the midst of reckoning with what a life without Anne looks like, they made an unexpected decision. They forgave Connor. And through a process called restorative justice, they forewent a trial and instead chose to speak directly to Connor, who, overcome with guilt, had immediately turned himself in, and to Connor's parents, whose lives were also coming undone with this act of violence. And with the help of a mediator, they decided what would happen next. The forgiveness the Grossmares extended to Connor didn't make any of it easier. It wasn't even a decision all of their family agreed with. The forgiveness didn't make Connor any less guilty. It didn't mean that he wouldn't serve time. And it certainly doesn't mean that what he did was acceptable. But what it means is that the Grossmares, who have already lost so much, refuse to see Connor as their enemy. They refuse to believe punishing him would make any of this better, because nothing will bring Anne back. Nothing will change the fact that Connor will spend the rest of his life repenting for the fact that he murdered the woman he loved. Nothing will change the fact that Connor's dad will wonder every day what would have happened if that gun weren't in the house. Nothing will change the fact that a life was taken, an entire community shattered beyond imagination. Punishment won't change this. And no punishment Joseph had planned for his brothers can change the fact that he spent most of his life alone, marginalized, betrayed by those he trusted. Punishment can't fix a trauma like that. And though I wish it were different, neither can forgiveness. Our forgiveness alone cannot close the gaping wounds of our world. It cannot bring back Anne or any number of people who are gone too soon. It cannot rewind time. It cannot change things. Forgiveness alone cannot right these wrongs. But it can point us towards God's justice, toward a time, a place, a future, or hopefully something in the near present. I'm not exactly sure what it looks like, but it's towards a world in which forgiveness and mercy are not unexpected or outrageous U-turns. And in fact, with God's justice, forgiveness, well, it almost feels obsolete, because what is there to forgive when we have all been restored to wholeness? Can't say for certain, but I think that is the future Joseph might have envisioned when he heard his brothers cry out. He saw two paths in front of him, one in which he lives into the world of punishment and pain and vengeance. In this certain future, he knows what will happen next. He knows the cycle will continue, his family will likely die from famine, and any glimmer of reconciliation is extinguished. But there is another path Joseph saw. The road he chooses has him forgive his brothers and to stop calling them the enemy. It is not the expected path, and it's not an easy one that promises he will never be hurt again. This path can't guarantee that Joseph and his brothers and their children's children will ever live in easy harmony. But it is the path that sees not what is, but what could be. It pulls back the curtain on God's justice and invites us to take a peek. It's not an easy choice to make, and it might not feel as satisfying as punishment in the moment. But friends, our world has enough violence and enough hatred, and I am tired of expecting punishment. I want to walk the unexpected path, to follow Joseph's lead and to put one foot in front of the other, no matter how complicated it may feel. I want to follow a roadmap towards God's restoring justice, of which forgiveness is just one part, and hope against hope that this is possible in the here and now. And maybe, if we all decide to walk this path, we might find one another there, trusting that even when it is difficult, even when the path before us seems too complicated, we do not have to make these choices alone. And so let's make some unexpected choices together. Amen.